Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday, which means it's time for yet another salty Saturday morning. I am your host, Mr. Kadish. Get it right. And we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be talking about Mad Max. We're going to be talking about He-Man. We're going to be talking about something nobody wants to talk about, which is Star Wars, apparently. And we also got a nifty little story about the Netflix of AI, which is going to be an interesting topic. But before we get into all that, I want to introduce my fantastic panel of nerds, starting with everyone's favorite high cholesterol, Dutch Butters. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good, buddy. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Matt Vader 74 is your dead name. We don't no longer use that.
Don't name my name. Don't use it. Don't do that. That's
don't
cool.
do me.
I will file a complaint with Google, and I will get everybody canceled. Okay, just so you know. Just so you know. Yeah, Vader's dead. Dutch Butters lives. So there you go.
Vader died so Dutch Butters can live. Yes,
right.
Indeed.
I shedding that Star Wars stink off my legacy. So yeah, I'm getting rid of it.
Right on. Well, it's good to see you as always, Mr. Butters. And speaking of being canceled, we have our shield against all things woke, Mr. Brian Montgomery himself from the Popcast. He's here. He's queer. Wow. He is our gender non-conforming, non-binary panelist. How you doing, Brian?
Anyone find it weird that I used my full legal name
I did.
there?
You just got doxxed, man.
That felt really weird. He's our shield against everything woke, Brian Montgomery. And here's his social security number and address. Good luck with your being a shield now. Not doing bad, man. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I see you survived season 5 of Discovery.
Oh my God. The salt mines were running thick on Thursday. I forced Shane to watch the entire series, and he did it in like 3 days. And every single episode, he was calling me, cursing me out, basically. He's like, what is this? Why are you making me do this? Like, Shane, they want us to have one last Discovery stream, dude. Let's give them what they want. He was mad the whole time. And by the time and then our uncle died, and he had to put his dog down. And the same day he watched the last 2 episodes of Discovery, he had a rough day.
Jeez, that sounds
terrible. It was a rough day.
You gotta be nicer to your brother, dude.
I mean, he made me watch Flower Moon, whatever that movie was. So
I feel like Shane is teetering on the edge of just giving up.
Yeah, he's on the edge. He's on the edge.
He's just gonna go get a job at Walmart or something.
Yeah, he's like
I'm gonna go be a greeter. I'm out of here.
Wait till I make you guys start watching The Acolyte and Rings of Power. Then we'll see
at the same
who has
time.
a better job.
Brian and I are gonna go do a new show. We're kicking you off.
Yeah, exactly.
We're leaving. The show's gonna be called "Never Talk About Star Wars Again."
Well, I'll just replace you like I replaced Odin with our next panelist, Mr. Huffman himself. How you doing, Huff?
Yo.
Thanks for hopping in last minute.
Good man. I hate pop culture. It's all terrible.
Terrible.
So for those of you who might be wondering, so Odin is traveling, so he wasn't able to make today. So Mr. Huffman was able to graciously step in and replace him for today's show. And Tom Connors, it's his birthday. So I kind of doubt that he's going to show up today because he's too busy partying with all the ladies over in his neck of the woods.
I would call the hooker up. Can you bring some cake and bring that Mad Max movie with you so we can watch it together?
Oh yeah, we know
Mad Max.
We know how much Tom loves Furiosa, indeed. And joining us for the first time on Salty Saturday is the one and only the Little Platoon. He's slumming it today instead of being on Critical Drinker Stream. He's with the Salty Nerds. How you doing, Mr. Platoon?
I am well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Haven't I streamed with you before? I thought I had. You have never been on this show before?
Not on this one. But I've been on so many, and I have a terrible head for faces. So we may well have been.
We definitely
have. Then I forgot. Yeah.
Maybe Giant Slayer or something.
That's possible. Oh yeah, no, that does sound familiar. Yeah, we probably did.
Yes, indeed. Brian, try to keep track of all the live streams you're on.
Yeah.
It's so many, dude. It's so many.
It is so many. And speaking of so many, we have so many people who support the stream. I want to give them a big shout out. Mr. Scotty Dubs, still undefeated at the top spot for 199 super chat. Really appreciate his support. He is our top contributor currently. followed closely by Mr. William Forbes, who we haven't seen for a while, but hopefully he's doing well. And our most consistent donator is, of course, Mexican Iron Man. Always appreciate him. He's probably busy with the Tom Connor's birthday stream today, so we might not see him. But I also want to give a big shout out to all of our wonderful gifters, people who gift the Salty Nerd Club memberships to the chat. We got Jillian N, WG, Sam Schwager, Major Chai Chai, and Eric Winberg. You guys are so generous. We really appreciate you, which brings us to our goal for this stream, which is 10 new members. If we can get 10 new memberships, whether they be gifted or just regular signups, be really happy about that. And also, guys, don't forget to leave comments in the videos about the topics we talk about. We want to hear your opinions on them. And if you have suggestions for topics down the road, we would love to hear those as well. And guys, also, just to give you a heads up, at the end of this stream, we are going to be redirecting everyone to Mephisto's movie reviews. He's got a live stream that goes on right after us. So if you guys want to stick around and check out his show, I know he'd appreciate it, and we would also appreciate it as well. And we just uploaded our brand new movie commentary over on the Salty Nerd Patreon, which is saltynerdclub.com. Just go to that website, takes you right to our Patreon. And Mr. Butters, we have uploaded our Fifth Element commentary.
Oh, great.
Finally. So
Yeah.
that is up there now. And we've that is our fourth commentary so far. We've also done, we start off with Masters of the Universe, the original. Then we went to Hackers with Angelina Jolie. And our last one was Pacific Rim, which you guys did with Blaine from Criticless. So
Hack Grin, baby. Hashtag it.
If you guys like hearing us shit on movies in real time, then be sure to check out our movie commentaries. They're a lot of fun. We've been having a really good time doing them. And before we get to our first topic today, guys, we got some members' chats to get to real quick. We got GJJ, a member for 10 months, and he says, "Hail all. Hail GJJ. Good to see you." But guys, not to be outdone, our top contributor is coming in hot today, Mr. Scotty Dub for $99.99. Bless the genius of Burke. I humbly offer this hundo to my beloved salty nerds amid hopes that further success on the second and third tier foreign weapons sales market will yield more 5 hundos for you guys. Cinema is dying, and you are our new entertainers. Hashtag LFG Forbes. So, Scotty Dub, thank you so much for your generosity. We really appreciate you coming in here and being so generous, not only with your money, but also with your time and with your insights. Appreciate you, man. You make this really exciting for us to do, because we're always wondering, hey, when's Scotty going to hop into the chat and let us know what's going on?
Scotty doesn't
All right, guys.
know.
Scotty doesn't know. Exactly. I like that, Brian. Thanks for that cue. Thanks for that. All right, guys. So as we all know, Furiosa hasn't been doing all that well at the box office, unfortunately. It's a brilliant movie. I loved it. And I think that this is a movie where once it gets to streaming, people are going to be watching the shit out of it. But unfortunately, it's not doing too well. And that might have ramifications down the road, because in a recent interview on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, George Miller, the 80-year-old creator of the Mad Max saga, basically came out and talked about his plans for the next Mad Max movie, which was a Mad Max saga. And I'll just share this this news article right here. So basically, George Miller envisioned a trilogy based around the Fury Road movies. So you had Fury Road, you had Furiosa, and then you had a second prequel to Fury Road, which was going to be called Wasteland. And it was going to focus on Mad Max's story leading up to the beginning of Fury Road, where he gets captured by Immortan Joe's Rangers. And it was kind of a sad interview in the sense that, so I'm going to read you guys the quote. He says, "I'd say that it certainly has a lot of action in it, but it's also a saga. It's a year-long story. Fury Road happened over 3 days and 2 nights. You could almost say that the first act, some part of the second act, and the third act mostly play in real time. Quite a different kettle of fish than Furiosa. I'm still figuring out what to do with the Wasteland. I'm just waiting to see the reception on Furiosa. If it all lines up, then we'll go ahead with it. And unfortunately, I don't think there are any new Mad Max movies in the cards." I wanted to ask you, Mr. Butters, so you and I, like, we're both big fans of Fury Road and Furiosa, but I'm wondering, do you think that if George Miller had started with The Wasteland, which was a Mad Max centric story, and then followed it up with Furiosa, it would have played better? or do you think that that going with Furiosa was the right way to go?
I think people would have liked it because it had Mad Max in it, and then as soon as Furiosa or Fury Road came out, whatever order he put it in, people would have cried because Mad Max isn't in my Mad Max movie. So I think they would have just cried on the same hill, just to be completely honest with you. But yeah, man, these are really good movies. They're fun movies. I really want to see him do this Wasteland movie. I'm not sure how he's going to do it, but it would be cool if he did, because I want to see it. Don't get me wrong. I do want to see Mel back as an old grizzled Max Rostenkowski. I really do want to see that, but I want to see George, do his thing. This isn't like he's sold out to the mouse and he's not doing what he wants to do. He's making his movies the way he wants to make them, and I kind of respect that a little bit. So
right on. Well, he is 80, so he's got many more movies left in him. But Little Platoon, one of the things I wanted to ask you, like, you're a very insightful movie critic, and you have really good takes, in my opinion, on movies. So I wanted to get your take on what's going on with Furiosa, why it's underperforming, and if you think that it was a mistake to focus on her story as opposed to Max's story.
Yeah, I should say that the good takes are almost entirely the result of the accent. It's actually nothing I'm saying. It's just it sounds much better when I'm saying it. I don't know. So I've full disclosure, I've not actually had time to watch Furiosa itself yet. On Mad Max, generally, I think. I mean, from what I remember, Fury Road, though it was quite popular and well received, it did actually make a loss in the end. Like, it made a gross profit, but once you account for all of the many expenses, it didn't actually make money. This is not a huge barnstorming property that a huge audience is waiting to see come back. It has a loyal core audience. It doesn't have a massive audience. And it's sort of replicating a lot of the flaws you see in other franchises as well. They're spending upwards of 150, 60, 70, 80 million dollars on a film, expecting it to somehow make money off of that. And this is the opposite ethos that made the first one so successful. The original Mad Max is so successful. It broke records for being incredibly profitable because they spent so very little money to make it. And it earned an audience based on the strength of the storytelling and the unique visual style and the fact that this is such a brand new and exciting property. Spending less to make more is probably something most of Hollywood needs to learn at this point. You can't keep operating as though you have the next Marvel Cinematic Universe in your hands, where you can justify spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes that you might realistically make $1 billion. That's such a unique thing that happened in a very short period of time with a very small, very particular franchise. And it's sort of distorted, I think, budgeting for most of Hollywood. And I think the sooner we get back to smaller budget films, the better chance we have of more things like Mad Max coming and more sequels being made to that. As for whether or not the fact that it's a Mad Max film without Mad Max in it had any impact at all on the box office, probably. I mean, it's believable. I can see that being slightly disappointing to people who were maybe erring on the side of caution when it comes to going to see this movie. It's focusing on a person who is not the titular character, and it does sort of seem as though the name is dropped in just because, well, they think the name will get bums on seats. Bums go on seats and find that the name isn't actually present in the movie. But I don't know how big an impact that would have had. I think my overall impression of it is just that it's got a loyal audience, but the loyal audience is not enough to make it enough money to make the budget back.
Yeah, and I think audiences, no matter how loyal they are kind of out of the habit of going to theaters to watch this stuff, especially when it's like 17 days turnaround between theater and streaming right now.
That came out in the interview, didn't it? But one of the interesting things about that, though, is that it's like all those studios which use COVID still as an excuse for underperformance. I look around and I think, well, that's not what happened with Top Gun Maverick, is it? I mean, people didn't not go to see that because they were out of the habit of going to the cinema. I think there are a lot of those defenses which don't necessarily hold up. But yeah, maybe that has something to do with it. It's just that there are other films that have made more money and been more successful despite people being also out of the habit.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that when we talk about Sony's optimistic take on the box office in a little bit. But I just want to remind everyone that Hollywood budgeting is really about money laundering and paying off unions. So that's one of the reasons why these budgets get so crazy. And I want to throw this over to Huff because, there is no greater culture warrior than Huff, in my opinion, over on X. He constantly calls out all things that are woke and stupid. So I wanted to get your take on this, Huff, because you know, a lot of criticism at Furiosa was like, oh, it's a girl boss, you know, like, you know, it's a female centric movie at the expense of the beloved male character. I personally didn't get that when I watched the movie, but I wanted to hear your take on it.
I think George Miller is brilliant, and he put this movie out at exactly the wrong time because nobody has any trust in a female lead anymore. So that was strike number one. Because I think you're right. I mean, I don't think Furiosa really falls into the, you know, the Captain Marvel, Rey from Star Wars, you know, Doctor Who, Mikey, whatever her name is.
Michael Burnham.
I don't care. I don't care, Brian. I don't care. But these franchise-killing girl bosses that didn't earn anything. I mean, that's kind of the stories that Furiosa did earn stuff, and it's a proper, you know, traditional hero's journey with some background to it, even though it's in one movie. And George Miller is a guy who can pull it off. But the problem is he put it in a movie that's kind of 6 years or 7 years after everyone's just so sick to death, and even smaller stuff like Terminator. Here's some girl bosses. We don't want to see girl bosses. We don't want you to kill John Connor and then bring in a bunch of girl bosses. It's TV, it's film. There's almost no franchise left that hasn't suffered from this. And so people see that, you know, Anna Joy Taylor is going to be Furiosa, and they just kind of like, all right, this is going to, I don't want to take the risk. Even if maybe it looks interesting, I don't want to take a chance that it's going to be another cringy girl boss. So I think that hurt him. The other thing that I think hurt him, and again, you can pull this stuff off just fine. Maverick is one of the examples. You can bring back a franchise from the 80s and have it be massively successful. But Top Gun was by far the exception. People are tired of seeing old stuff, especially, I mean, Furiosa is a prequel to a reboot sequel of a franchise that ended in the 80s. How many of those have we seen? It's like everything. That's all Hollywood is doing right now. And how successful have they been? Not really. And people are gun shy about it. So those two things, I think, hurt it real bad, even though it was, you know, a good movie. So I feel sorry for him. I hope he gets a chance to make another one because the guy's a great filmmaker. I love Babe. It's my personal favorite George Miller movie. Maybe some of you guys like Happy Feet. But the guy's crazy versatile. And I can't call you Matt Vader anymore.
Mr. Butters.
Sorry, Mr. Butters. I think you might run in the same problem, even though I'd love to see Mel Gibson come back. People are kind of tired of that too. I mean, they don't want to see an old. The assumption would be, for me, and I think broadly would be, he's going to come back. He's lived a life of pathetic failure, like Han Solo, like Luke Skywalker, like the Terminator. I mean, look at all, like Indiana Jones. I mean, their marriages failed. They aren't successful.
Sure.
They're miserable octogenarians, and then they die. And that would be the expectation. So, I mean, I don't want to spend $15 or whatever in 3 hours of my life at a theater and take that chance. So, I don't know.
I hear you.
I should save some of this stuff for the Sony talk, but I do think that the fact that Furiosa was good, even though it was dealing with kind of the current lousy movie-going milieu right now, I think it may give me some hope that this Sony dude, which we will talk about shortly, is actually maybe right, or at least not completely wrong and stupid.
Yeah,
I guess you're right. We probably don't want to see the adventures of old Max in the retirement town.
I don't know. I mean, George Miller could make it awesome, and Mel Gibson could make it awesome.
Yeah.
That could be possible. But looking at, you know, the absolute detritus of studios bringing back huge, expensive movies and what they did to these characters from the 80s that we love, I just don't trust that it would. Even if it wasn't George Miller, it would be the studio. You have to make him fail, and then he has to die.
Yep.
All right. Well, Brian, I want to throw this to you. So,
Yeah.
you know, I'd really like to see what George Miller had planned for Max in this movie, Wasteland. Because one of the cool things about Furiosa was that it really expanded upon the universe that we were introduced to in Fury Road. Like, it almost feels like the Wasteland is very different in the first 3 Mad Max movies than it is in the next couple. And Thunderdome is actually closer to the vision of what Fury Road was and what we got in Furiosa. And I just think it'd be fascinating to kind of like, expand out on like what he built with like, the 3 different fortresses and all this other stuff from Max's perspective as opposed to Furiosa's. But I also think that it might have been like a big misfire for him not to do the Wasteland first and then maybe follow that up with Furiosa. So I want to get your take on this. Do you think that there's any road for Miller to not only make this, final movie in his proposed Fury Road trilogy, but also like a way in which to open it up to other filmmakers to make other Mad Max style movies?
Yeah, I know a lot of people like the movie, and that's great. I'm sure it's a good movie, but I think a lot of people have the same apprehension that I have. And with yet another movie he wants to come out with that will yet again be another prequel, and you got to ask yourself, like, Huff, you're a writer, right? You write books.
I write books, I write movies, I write children's books, I write all sorts of things, Brian.
So when you put your book out there, does the chapters go 4, 3, 2, 1, or does it go 1, 2, 3, 4?
I do it sequentially.
Right, yeah, and that's most stories are told that way, and it's okay to. Hollywood has this weird thing they're doing. Like Wasteland sounds like a cool idea. But why does everything have to be in reverse nowadays? Like the stories are all told as prequels, and it's silly. Like nothing ever goes forward.
Well, I'll tell you, not to interrupt. I know we're not supposed to talk, but as a story writer, I mean, as someone who has written massive narratives in lots of different formats, there's no stakes. It's kind of the same problem as multiverse storytelling or time travel storytelling. You erase all the stakes. You, at least for the major character, are you worried about what happens to Furiosa or Immortan Joe? No, of course you're not. You don't care. You don't care. So the only character you can possibly care about is Chris Hemsworth, but he's not in Fury Road. So you kind of assume that he's going to bite it or something's going to happen to where he's irrelevant. And so you don't care about the characters. They're just watching stuff happen.
Yes, you already know. You already know how it ends. Not exactly how it ends, but you have a pretty good idea of who's living and who's dying.
Yeah.
The stakes are low. And that's you right on the head, man. I think multiverse storytelling is lazy. It's like, here's an Omni tool or a Swiss knife for whatever you want to do. And having that, connection, having that in your toolbox makes for lazy writing. And I think prequels make for lazy writing. You already have your ending, so now let's just write something before that. Like, I'm just so tired of prequels, dude. And look, I think Fury Road was a good movie. I don't see why you couldn't sort of use that as like a soft reboot to reboot the Mad Max franchise and go forward from there. Why not make a second Fury Road movie? That actually focused on Mad Max. Like, okay, Mad Max is in that movie. Okay. So now the next Mad Max saga actually has Tom Hardy as Mad Max. Why go backwards again and tell yet another prequel? And then Wasteland sounds like a cool idea, but once again, it's a prequel. Can we not move forward anymore? Is that not possible? And it's not just this movie. It's like every franchise is going backwards. Every one of them. So I'm on this new thing where I'm like, look, if it's a prequel, I'm just not going to watch it until it comes out on streaming. Either tell a new story or at least continue the story. But for Christ's sake, stop going backwards in time, dude. It's silly.
All right. Well, I want to open this up to the panel at large. So is there a path forward for the Mad Max franchise? Do you think this could be something where they create like a Wasteland universe where other filmmakers could come in and kind of like tell stories set within the Wasteland? Or is this a franchise that's going to die with George Miller?
I don't think there's a way forward on current budgets, and probably not on a theater distribution model either. Given that it keeps losing money at cinemas, you could potentially see a streaming service pick it up with stricter requirements. Hopefully, actually, streaming services are the only people who can still afford to actually waste a huge amount of money on things that don't bring anything back. Hello, Rebel Moon. But it's not impossible. Again, it does have a loyal core following, and studios are still mindful of that sort of thing because they think it means they have to do less work. On the prequels point, I slightly push back on the suggestion that prequels are themselves just always going to be lazy. The problem is that very few people know how to write them. That you can do prequels in a number of ways. The best form of prequel really is sort of the tragedy. So the old Greek tragedies are ones where you already know what's going to happen. The audience is actually already completely clued in on what's going on. The audience has knowledge that the main characters don't. And the tragedy of that is that you see things unfold and you see the mistakes they make and you see what's coming before they do. And then so that's sort of the model that the Star Wars prequels tried to go for. And I think in terms of the model, they succeeded. It's the storytelling that really falls down, and the dialogue and the acting and all the things that everyone knows how to complain about with the Star Wars prequels. But as a tragic form, it's not terrible. The other way to do it, though, is that if you've got a massive post-apocalyptic universe that you've set up, you've got a massive amount of world building, which poses lots of interesting questions. You allow yourself to explore those questions, but you don't tie yourself so strictly to characters that you know are going to pop up in later installments, because as has been pointed out, you already know what's going to happen to them. So it's very difficult to make people care about the stakes. Solo, the other Star Wars movie, a prequel, had this problem. They tried to make us feel the tension when Han Solo and Chewie are jumping across trains and you already know they're not going to die. That's just not convincing or compelling storytelling. So if you are going to actually branch out into a Mad Max cinematic universe in whatever form, and if you are going to keep doing prequels, then you have to be prepared to not use Mad Max, not use Furiosa, and not use any character you know will pop up later except in a cameo role. And you have to find new people to tell other aspects of the story that haven't yet been explored. How does the world get to the state that we meet it in the first movie? All the rest of that stuff. There are really interesting things you can still do with prequels. It's just that we're too lazy to do them.
100% true.
Hollywood's definitely too lazy. Huff, you've been a big critic of the fact that most writers in Hollywood, most producers in Hollywood, the people who are behind the decision-making process, just have absolutely no clue what they're doing in terms of storytelling. And so it's just the easiest, laziest path of least resistance constantly.
Yes. And not to get into details, but I do put most of that blame on the studio suits and not the creatives, who from writers to actors to showrunners and producers, they want to do new stuff and they are not allowed to do new stuff. Then they're just not, unless it has a 40-year history and an old IP that there's still a little bit of meat on the bones that the vultures can kind of pick at. They're not getting money spent. Now, I've heard secondhand rumors that may change. I was talking to a guy, an actor, and you've seen his movies for sure, who has a good relationship with a big studio with a lot of money, who's famous. They do IP movies that cost $100 million. And what I heard from him is they're going to start looking at doing, instead of one big $100 million movie based on a big brand that you've heard of these movies at least and probably seen them, and you probably don't like them very much because they're not very good. They're going to start doing, $5, $20 million movies. And that's kind of the attitude of the creatives that I talk to, is that why aren't we spending less money? I mean, exactly what you said, Platoon. You spend less money and let filmmakers do new things. Let them make new IP. It gives you more freedom to be creative, to stretch the budget, to spend more time on the story and not a big splash of CGI garbage just on the screen to distract from the fact that you don't have a story. So hopefully Hollywood will figure it out and move in that direction, because this is not profitable when it comes down to it. Mining this IP over and over and over and over again isn't making them any money, and it's killing fan bases, and it's almost killed every single fan base.
That's a good point. Speaking of creating new IPs and stuff like that, have you guys heard of this thing called showrunner? This is the AI of Netflix, basically, and they're out in like a beta test right now. And it's basically this. So this is a streaming service that allows people to create, a TV show or a movie. And then if you want to keep watching that, AI will come in and generate new episodes or a sequel to what it was you enjoyed watching. In addition to that, AI also just creates new TV shows or movies for you to watch based off of prompts that you enter into the service. And it's kind of an interesting thing. There's this Gizmodo article that talks about it in not very favorable light, but it is billing itself as the Netflix of AI generated content. And they're looking to create both movies, games, and TV shows using this AI service. And so what they're looking to do is basically this is an app that you would download onto your smart TV or phone or device or whatever the case may be. And they're going to have like a library, just like when you log into Netflix, you'll see like, recommended titles. And you'll have the pure AI generated stuff. And right now it's only animated, cartoons basically, where basically there's an AI creating new episodes constantly. So if you like something and you want to binge watch it, you can basically binge watch it indefinitely. The AI will just keep creating like new episodes for you. But a little bit more towards the curated side, filmmakers can actually go in there and publish a scripted movie or TV show or whatever, and then users can say like, okay, I want to watch another episode of this TV show, and I want the plot to be about walking dogs. And then the AI will go and create a new episode of this TV show using the same actors, the same voices, the same everything, but the plot was just generated by an AI. And essentially there are also plans for like, if creators make good episodes or good sequels or whatever, they will become like, they will become part of the library that everyone can watch. And then the original creators of the show or movie will get a revenue split with the new creators in terms of like the subscription model or however they have it generated. But I can see this as being like the future of artificial intelligence and home theater consumption and stuff like that, where how many times have we gotten to the end of something like, say, Stranger Things, and then we have to wait 5 years to find out what happens next? What if you just want to keep watching, right? What if you're watching the latest Star Trek TV series and you think it's crap, and you go in and in a prompt tell it, hey, here's a better story, and I want to watch this, and then it uses the same actors and characters and sets and stuff like that, but you get to see like your own customized Star Trek episode. So I feel like there's a lot of potential for this, but there's also a lot of moving parts where like it's probably not going to work very well. So I want to get Huff's take on this first and foremost, since he is one of our primary critics in terms of like the stuff that's currently coming out. Huff, what do you think about AI taking over in terms of like content generation for streaming services?
Well, I do a little bit of AI prompt generating myself. I do a lot. I've messed around with a lot of AI prompt generation. I've actually also considered writing exactly what this is into one of my shows that I'm developing. I think that it's inevitable. I think just based on my experience with the technology now, that for a long, long way going forward, you're going to get a product and it's going to be weird. There's going to be dialogue that doesn't make sense. They're going to have weird number of fingers. You have to do so many iterations of the same prompt before you get something that even remotely resembles something like a human would do. So many artifacts and weirdness, and that's going to be kind of exponentially worse with doing an entire show. That being said, I kind of think it's inevitable that in 20 years you will have the ability to say, I want to watch a space western starring John Wayne and Cary Grant, and it will be generated and it'll be 90 minutes and it'll be really a weird experience, even though it'll do what you say. Now, what I do think will happen is, and this is something I've also done, it's not going to be a professional project. It's not going to take the place of a movie that was made by people, but what it will take the place of, and I think this is true for all of the kind of middleman concept art, storyboarding, all of that stuff is going to be done by AI. I don't see how it's not. AI will not keep a character model, so it's going to be really, really hard to do anything like a proper comic or anything like that. But if it's something that's not meant to be consumed by an audience,
it doesn't keep the model yet.
It doesn't keep the model yet. Yeah, that's right. And obviously, it may get good enough where you really can say, "I want this movie," and it's going to give you something, on the level of Citizen Kane. But I think it's going to take a lot of the very, very time-consuming and costly effort of paying one guy to spend 20 hours on one concept art piece for an environment, or paying a team to spend weeks on a movie storyboard. I think that stuff, that middleman kind of creative stuff, is going to be done on a computer by a guy who's savvy with text prompts, because you do have to do a little bit of engineering to get what you want. There's a little bit of I won't say art to it, but there's a little bit of a technique to it. So I don't think we're at the point where anything that this thing is going to generate is any good yet. But I think in 10 years that sure could not be true.
Well, the technology is always evolving, and I want to throw this to Little Platoon, because what this essentially signals is like a shift from passive entertainment consumption to active entertainment consumption, in the sense that the audience can actually interact with the service that they're dealing with in order to consume entertainment. And Netflix kind of lightly experimented with this with the Bandersnatch, which was kind of like the choose your own adventure streaming movie, where basically at certain points in the story you could choose to do option A or option B, and the story would turn out differently based off of your choices. And it was kind of like a cool little like niche feature that they have yet to replicate, I think, because like it takes like so much time and effort to do those types of things. But in this case, you have a situation where you mentioned Rebel Moon in our previous segment, where like, let's say you have a Rebel Moon on Netflix and it's shit, right? And someone like you could basically go into a text prompt through the app and say like, hey, instead of this happening in this scene, make this happen. And you can basically rewrite the movie that you're watching into a better movie. And if enough people like that movie, it then becomes added as a regular thing to the library that other people can enjoy. And so all of a sudden you have different competing versions of the same thing that, gives people more choice to watch, and also gives, a valid way of like basically making bad content better. So what's your take on this? I know that we're still probably like a decade out from it being like, up to that level, but the idea that you can basically keep binging a show because AI will just keep spinning out new episodes for you, it's kind of interesting, don't you think?
It is, yeah, and it's always unwise to bet against any sort of technological development like this, because I think even if you were talking 5 years ago and saying that AI would be where it is today, people wouldn't have believed you. And here we are. So it's, the rate of growth is it's hard to keep abreast of. The only sort of limiting factor I can see, well, actually there's a few limiting factors, but one of the big ones is that the thing that seems to always get dropped out of any conversation about what AI's future is going to be with regards to popular IPs and continuing shows and things like that is the presumption is that AI somehow exists at the moment. It does, outside of rules and laws around intellectual property and copyright. You cannot have an AI self-generating anything. AI does not create in that sense. AI has to be trained on other people's stuff. It has to learn based on stuff that's already been done and stuff that's owned by other people. And this is particularly pertinent if you're talking about extending a Star Trek show or rewriting Rebel Moon for mass distribution or to show it to other people. You don't actually have the right to do that. And at the moment, like, there are not very many checks on AI's ability to use like immense amounts of data in its training models that it doesn't have any proprietary right to. I think there is a lawsuit at the moment it might be against OpenAI. I think it's by, I want to say it's the New York Times. It's one of the bigger newspapers, which is basically saying you're training your AI based on our entire public record of stuff that you actually have to subscribe to, and you don't have the rights to this. And now your AI model is being allowed to use it for its own purposes, and then it's going to inform itself. Same thing with AI generated voices. You say, like, you want to have the likeness of John Wayne in a future space western, or the voice of Christopher Lee for a particular character, because who wouldn't want that voice? Well, okay, but those people have rights over their own presentation, and their estates, if they are dead, have rights over them and their property and their content as well. I think that's going to take some more time to develop, and there'll be an interesting no man's land until it does. But I do see quite a few more restrictions coming into play before we get to the point where a model like the one we're discussing is actually recreating watchable shows. Like, before you get to the point where you can like convincingly give us another series of Star Trek, there will be a law in place which says you can't do that because you do not own Star Trek. Now, for things that the rights question doesn't come into it, like brand new IPs, it's still questionable because the AI has to be trained on existing IP, but to the extent you're giving it text prompts yourself and creating something which is brand new, that would be different. Then you get to the interesting question as to, well, you know, how good are most people at actually creating stuff? Everyone knows how to be a critic because most people vaguely know what's wrong with something. But Christopher Hitchens used to have that saying. It said that most people have a book in them, and in most cases, that's where it should stay, because a lot of people actually don't really know what they're doing when it comes to creating believable stories, characters, and all the rest of that. So I don't know. I think this particular streaming service is way too early. I think it will get to the point where the technology is capable of doing it. Whether we are capable of using that technology and whether the law allows us to use that technology, I think, are different questions.
Well, I think that there's definitely a case to be made that, so like in a service like this, if they're making original series or original movies, right, that they have the rights to, and they want to open it up to user interfaces, they can definitely do that without like by including it in the contracts for like whoever's involved in it, and also in the terms of service for the use of the app, where it basically says anything you generate we own, even though you generated it. But in the case of like really advanced AI stuff, which is basically, you know, there are no actors who are in the show. It's all AI generated. So there are no royalties that you have to pay to those people, right? The voices are generated, even though it's trained on other stuff, it spits out something unique and original. Therefore, they don't owe anything to like the original generation, because you could say all art is derivative. But I want to throw this to Brian, because Brian, you've actually done work with AI. You've trained your own AI to replace your brother, essentially. And you probably have more insights into like how something like this could work than anyone on the panel. So I want to throw this to you and get your opinion on it.
Yeah, I've actually created video with AI. We have our own AI. I call it Shane, Shain, and it uses my brother's voice, and we use it to moderate Discord. We've generated I've used it to actually remove backgrounds from video. Like if you video edit, it's actually a lot of work to do like rotoscoping and stuff like that. So often I will use AI. I will take a clip, let's say an 8-second clip, you know, export like 1,000 images out of the frames, and then feed that into the AI. Have the AI, you know, identify like the character. Let's say it's Michael Burnham, and then have AI remove everything that's not Michael Burnham from the frame, or remove all of Michael Burnham from every single frame. And then I can pump that back into the video system, and then I have the exact same video clip, but sans Michael Burnham. We've done that before in some of our videos. And I think the technology will eventually get there where people can actually, layman can ask for something and get it. I think it'll be primarily animated, and I think that at least 60% of it will be used for porn, 100%. The very first thing that people are going to try is porn. That'd be the first thing that they look for. And I think it's a couple years away. I think it's maybe 5-6 years away before video is like a reasonable thing to ask for, like long form video. Like right now, the video we're getting right now is really short clips. They don't usually continue themes from frame to frame. It's a little bit off. And the best thing AI is used for is not for like, give me Star Wars, but better. The best thing AI is used for is by professionals that are already creating. and you can utilize AI as a tool to make your creative process more streamlined. Like I said, like removing Michael Burnham from a frame, or doing rotoscopy. Like the thing is, a lot of this stuff takes a lot of man hours and work, and sometimes it actually impedes the creative process when you're like, well, I got to spend the next 6 hours, removing these pieces from these artifacts from frames or something. Well, if you can relegate that to an AI that you've trained specifically to do that job, then you can continue creating what you're creating and continue telling your story while that thing is, in the middle of doing a lot of the grunt work. And that's what AI, I think, the best case for AI, at least when it comes to creating something, is going to be used for designers, editors, storytellers, to help with the grunt work, to get through a lot of the stuff that is actually going to impede them from telling a story. I think when it comes to the Netflix of AI, I think it's at least 5 years away. It's going to be mostly animated and 50% pornography.
Well, there are some limitations that these services can put on them to keep the pornography off. But I'm going to throw this to Butters. Mr. Butters, how many times have you watched a great TV show? Like, let's just say Norseman on Netflix, one of the greatest comedies of all time. And we find out that Netflix has canceled the series, but we want to watch more episodes. How great would it have been to just tell an AI, is like, hey, make me another season of Norseman, and been able to keep watching it with the same type of quality? Do you think that that's the future, and that could be something that audiences generally want and accept?
Oh, you were talking to me?
Yes, Mr. Butters. Yes, I was.
Man, I'm so zoned out right now. I don't even know what's going on. You guys are all talking about AI and stuff, and all I want to do is it just makes me want to go drink. This stuff is freaking me out, man. It really is. And until the time I can go play on a legit holodeck on the Enterprise, I don't want anything to do with it. Because that's you know what I'm saying. No, this stuff is so above my ability to comprehend that I really zoned out. You completely zoned out of the entire conversation. It's weird. It's just weird. I don't understand the technology. I don't care about the technology. And I think it's just going to put people like Huff and people who create, and you, Matt, it's going to make you guys hard to do your work. It's going to make it, it's competition for you guys. And then it's going to take stuff that you do and absorb it into itself and try to make itself better. There's no way to win, right? I mean, everything you do is just going to absorb your knowledge and use it against you. So yeah, I don't like it. I don't like AI. It's weird. I think it has its uses, but I think where this is going takes it into a very weird and strange place. I'm getting evil AI computer vibes off of all this kind of stuff, and it's very strange to me. So that's all I got. Sorry, man.
I mean, I would argue that regular humans learn from artists that came before them in order to learn how to draw, anatomy, style, stuff like
Everything
that.
Is based on something.
Everything is based on something. But I think what I find so fascinating, and I want to just throw this out to the panel for anyone to answer, is this idea that TV is going to become interactive. Entertainment's going to become interactive. You don't just sit there and passively watch a program. Now, let's say you don't like the ending to a movie, you can actually pause the movie and prompt in. It's like, hey, have the ending where the hero wins, or Jon Snow kills the Night King instead of Arya, or something like that. And you actually get to personalize your experience with a piece of content.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't have anything to complain about. So, who wants that?
Where would the show be without that?
Yeah, right.
Well, we might like talking about Star Wars for a change. But I think it also opens it up to the idea that people can make better content for other people to consume, and studios might actually learn how to improve their stuff by adopting it. Huff and Platoon, what do you guys think about that?
Everybody's zoned out. What?
No, I'm. You want me to answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you're right, Matt. I think it'll make it better. I think that if it's used as a tool, and there's actual competition in Hollywood, it'll make it better. I think that if the if the gatekeepers can no longer control the gate, then maybe creatives can come out and create things that give them a run for their money. Like I've been creating a lot of videos on our main channel. Like this next documentary we're coming out with is insane. It's taken me a long time. And a lot of that stuff I couldn't do. When we made our first documentary, I couldn't do all this stuff. Now I could do it professionally, but I wasn't paid enough. Like I can't spend 6 months making this documentary to put on our YouTube channel. Well, now I can do that. Something that would have taken me like 3 months, I can do it in like 3 weeks because we utilize AI. And I don't utilize AI to make the video. I utilize it to help me edit frames. You know, and like this is the kind of stuff. Like if AI is, I'm not saying AI used by some guy just like, give me boobs and anime, but like an actual trained creative. The best AI art and video that I've seen has not come from laymen. It's come from people that already know how to do the work.
Yeah.
And they're using it to make their job, to make it better. Like the AI video I saw that NVIDIA put out where like, look at our awesome balloon head AI. That was still that little movie they made was still made by actual editors that had to take thousands of hours of shitty footage and make it into 30 seconds of good footage.
Right.
You know, like this is like right now AI is a little bit of at least on the consumer side, it's just sort of a gimmick. But on the professional side, there's so many applications for it, even for writing, Huff. I think there's a lot of applications for writing.
You could do a rough draft really easily. And I'm working on my 3rd novel, and it's just a slog. And I know what happens, but I just don't want to sit down. And I have been tempted. I'm not going to do it, but I've been tempted saying, okay, here's what I need to happen in the chapter, and not use it for a final draft, but just
use it as inspiration.
Use it as inspiration. Use it as a rough draft. Use it for
like a writing prompt.
And I won't do that, but there will be people who do that.
There will be, but then like I'm with Miyazaki on that point. I think as soon as you start doing that, you're not actually making the art. The AI is doing that for you.
Yeah, that's right.
There are two sort of separate categories of use that we're talking about. There is AI to augment your skills as a creator, in which case, yes, I can see it being immensely useful. Then there is AI as the creator, and there are practical problems with that in that AI can't create; it can only innovate at best. Sometimes it can innovate well, but quite often it won't. It will just derive. Then there's the other side of which is like what actually comes into the definition of artistic creation. Like no one is actually creating. If you just give a text prompt and say, write me a story based on this prompt, you are not creating work of art. There's also the additional problem, which is that the more power you put into the hands of a single creator, quite often the more problems with the product you find. And that's partly what we're talking about when it comes to AI. You're giving one person the ability to subsume the jobs which would normally be delegated to any number of people involved in making a movie or making a video game or even editing when it comes to writing a book. And you are basically delegating all of that to the AI, and you're saying that I don't need anyone to do that. I'm just giving the sole creative impetus, and you work it out for me. Then there is actually no one there telling you the thing you think is a really good idea is impractical or a bad idea. It doesn't hold together. We already have this problem with a number of auteuristic sort of directors in Hollywood. Zack Snyder is a good example. Ryan Johnson is a good example. You give these individuals complete creative control, and what do they produce? Crap.
Yeah,
and I don't necessarily think that AI has enough checks and balances just on the artistic creation side to stop people taking very bad ideas and spending an awful lot of time turning them into very bad product. So it's not going to magic away all of the problems that we have currently in media.
And a good creative can out-creative AI. If nothing, for no other reason than it is 100%. Derivative. It is definitionally derivative. I think one of the things that I think it could be used for, and I totally agree with Brian that it is going to end up being a tool that takes the place of a lot of people being used by very good creative professionals. And so I paid a guy who does a lot of magic cards, but he works in oils. He does oil paintings to do my 2 covers because people do judge books by the covers. And it's great. And I love it because I have like 3 paintings. But most of his colleagues who are doing high-level professional work don't work in oils anymore. What they do is use digital programs. And I see AI, the best...
Photoshop.
Yeah, sure, Photoshop. But you can't just be some guy. I don't think democratizing creativity is going to end up with anything except stupid ideas and garbage. But if you have someone using it as a tool who already could do it, you have to be trained as an extremely good professional level oil painter to be able to take a program like Photoshop or any of the painting programs and put out good work. And they do it because now they don't have the hassle of they have a palette of literally any color that they want.
Yeah,
there's no dry time.
Break out oil paints, right?
Yeah, and so all it does is cut out those irritating steps. And I think AI can have a role in the creative process in that sort of sense.
Getting away from like the creator end of things, the professional end of things, like I'm looking at it from more of a consumer perspective in the sense that, number one, like the ability to sit down and say like, hey, I want a new episode of Seinfeld. Like, AI, give me a new episode of Seinfeld to watch. And it's something completely new and it's engaging and you can just enjoy it. But in addition to that, you also have a situation where the service itself gets all this new data because like they have metrics on their data in terms of like watch time and like retention and churn rate and all this other stuff. But once they start seeing what people are asking for in terms of like, okay, this one episode or this one show, people really want more episodes about dogs. Right. So it's like, okay, well, let's hire a creator to come on board and create more episodes of this show and have it be dog focused or like whatever the case may be. So the fact that consumers can actually input prompts to get more of what they want to watch, that feeds that data to the creators so that the creators know what the audience is really responding to and what it wants more of. I think
boobs.
Really opens things up to just having more entertainment at our fingertips. And it doesn't have to be entertainment that is shared widely. It could just be like kind of like how YouTube does the For You recommendations. It's just like you log into Netflix and it's like, hey, here's stuff that you wanted us to generate. Come watch it type thing. So I like the idea of interactive personalized experiences. Speaking of personalized experiences, want to give a big shout out to WG. We got us halfway to our membership goal by gifting 5 Salty Nerd Podcast memberships. Thank you so much, WG. Really
That's
appreciate that. It's very nice. We love it when people get to sign up for our memberships. And guys, check out the membership playlist on our channel. We do 2 member streams a month, and you can get all of our previous membership content there as well. So it should be good. Guys, you know what isn't good though?
Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Star
you.
Wars.
Star Wars indeed. So basically
Star Trek.
That too. But guys, there's this show called The Acolyte that's starting to premiere this month. And they've been the Lucasfilm people have been hitting the press pretty hard. And Leslie Headland has been getting a lot of criticism. The trailers have been getting a lot of criticism. The actors have been getting a lot of criticism. And so Kathleen Kennedy comes out and basically says, hey, you evil, toxic men, shut up. This isn't for you anymore. And
yeah, we know.
Then she wonders why nobody hires or watches their stuff. So there's this article. It's actually in the New York Times, but because the New York Times requires you to pay a subscription to read it, I'm just going off of the Dark Horizon summary of this stuff right here. Links to all the articles we're covering in the description. But I want to read you guys what Kathleen Kennedy basically said. So this article talks about how people are calling it the Acolyte online, the Wokalite. And they've complained about the show's diverse cast. It says Headland has found herself on the receiving end of direct criticisms in ways other male Star Wars showrunners like Joby Harold, Tony Gilroy, or John Watts have not. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Toby Harold was one of the executive producers on the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show. Tony Gilroy did Andor. He was the showrunner on that. And John Watts is the showrunner of Skeleton Crew, which hasn't even premiered yet. In fact, we only just got a synopsis about it, so there's actually nothing to criticize so far other than the concept itself. But I think it's kind of misleading that that they named these 3 guys, because Toby Harold and Tony Gilroy have gotten a lot of criticism for how they handled their shows, even though I thought Andor was pretty good. But Kennedy says that female creatives in the franchise have struggled with fan backlash to their respective film and TV franchise installments. And she says, I quote, operating within these giant franchises now with social media and the level of expectation, it's terrifying. I think Leslie has struggled a little bit with it. I think a lot of women who step into Star Wars struggle with this a bit more. Because of the fan base being so male-dominated, they sometimes get attacked in ways that can be quite personal. My belief is that storytelling does need to be representative of all people. That's an easy decision for me. And then Leslie Headland goes on to say, as a fan myself, I know how frustrating some Star Wars storytelling in the past has been. And just so you guys know, I think she's talking about the original trilogy and the prequels as opposed to any of the sequels. I felt it myself. Right. I stand by my empathy for Star Wars fans, but I want to be clear. Anyone who engages in bigotry, racism, or hate speech, I don't consider a fan.
Well, what do you consider bigotry and hate speech? I want to know who decides what is bigotry and hate speech.
Well, we're going to get that's yeah. I'll throw it to you, Brian. Take it away.
Who is defining these words? Because if I say I don't like that because it's 93% women and zero men in this TV show, and all the men that are in there are a bunch of beta cucks that are pushed around by women, you can tell that it's this female force nonsense. Is that bigotry? Like, is that because who's deciding what is bigotry? Who's deciding what is racist or sexist? Because at this point, anything you don't like that I say, you can call bigotry or racism or sexism or whatever. So I reject that notion that you are allowed to define those words because I am criticizing your shitty creative process.
All right. Well, I think that basically anyone who's white and male is how they define bigotry, racism, and sexism.
So I'm just automatically bigotry, I guess.
Bigot.
Exactly. Because that seems to be the focus on DEI, which is basically like everyone but straight white males are evil, essentially. But you know, I want to read you guys this thing where they actually quote J.J. Abrams in this, and he basically says that you can sort of find almost anything you want to in Star Wars. If you are someone who feels threatened by women and need to lash out against them, you can probably find an enemy in Star Wars. Anyone who wants to find a problem with anything can find a problem. The internet seems to be made for that. Of course, this is coming from the guy who made 2 of the worst Star Wars films ever. That's saying something. But Platoon, I want to throw this to you because this is just another example of gaslighting and rewriting history and attacking the core fan base of this franchise that, you know, Kathleen Kennedy has put in charge of. Like that, there's a part in this article where they mention how Daisy Ridley and Kelly Marie Tran were bullied off social media due to toxic male Star Wars fans, even though we know for a fact that's not the case. But I want to get your take on this. Like, do you think that there's ever going to be a time where the people at Lucasfilm wake up and realize that attacking your fan base is a losing strategy?
No, because every time they do it, they get promoted. So they have no personal investment in this at all. Until such time as they lose so much money that they lose the studio itself, they will carry on going. I'm getting a little bit tired of being told by people like Kathleen Kennedy that there is unique abuse directed at Leslie Headland and that this is because she is a woman. I think if you don't want unique abuse directed at the person helming a Star Wars show, do not hire the person who uniquely carried bags for Harvey Weinstein. That would be a good start. That's not something you can say of all women. That's not a sexist criticism. That is you seem to have hired a pretty nasty person who works pretty closely with a pretty nasty person type of criticism. It's also slightly ironic that most of the popular abuse that is bandied about is actually coming from the studio itself. You get Kathleen Kennedy saying the problem is, and it is just ipso facto, it's by its own nature, it is a problem that Star Wars has got too many men in it. The fan base is too male. That is a problem. You make a criticism of the writing of a female character and you're branded a sexist. You make a criticism of the writing of a diverse character and you're branded a racist. You make a criticism of the forced inclusion of a trans character and you're branded a bigot. By an incredibly wealthy, powerful person in charge of well, not so wealthy anymore, but nevertheless, an incredibly moneyed studio with an incredible amount of reach, which is then castigating all of its fans with this kind of nonsense. The only abuse that's really being directed by powerful people against the oppressed or against marginalized people, disempowered people, is coming from the studio itself. And it becomes self-fulfilling. There's a tweet doing the rounds at the moment, which has got quite a lot of support, basically supporting Kathleen Kennedy's statement here by saying, no, she's right. Lots of people hide their sexism behind criticisms of the writing of Star Wars shows. I said, well, at that point, it's impossible to win. The critic can't win, because even if they make a well-substantiated point, you're still going to use that as evidence of some hidden bigotry. I'm tired of this kind of thing. I think these people should just go and get fucked, frankly.
Well, speaking of getting
I
fucked,
agree.
I want to showcase this tweet from Heel versus Babyface, our good friend Az, who's never afraid to speak his mind. He says, Kathleen Kennedy admitted Star Wars was a male-dominated brand. Kathleen Kennedy has turned it into a Disney princess brand. Kathleen Kennedy understands it is antithetical to what the brand is. Kathleen Kennedy then complains that women are having a hard time cracking a male-dominated space. Kathleen Kennedy is fucking retarded. So,
just to add to that very quickly, I don't remember any male director or male head of a studio or male fan saying, you know what the problem with Barbie is? Barbie's too much of a female brand, and it's oppressive, and it's isolating men. Men are not sufficiently represented. There's not enough male creators involved in Barbie, and this needs to change because it's a fact. It's a problem by its very nature. That doesn't happen. What's the problem with having a fan base which is predominantly of one gender? That seems to have happened fairly naturally in the past.
Indeed, and you know, it's all based around agenda as opposed to reality, facts, and entertainment, and I think that's part of the reason Star Wars and Star Trek fans are so frustrated.
We really don't have our gender-based entertainment anymore, do we? When I was a kid, we had G.I. Joe was for boys, Star Wars was for boys, Barbie was for girls, and there was other things that I can't think of right now that were completely gender-based. Pink stuff is for girls, blue stuff is for boys, and that's just how we were raised, and this thing today where everything's all got to be melded together and molded together and all this gender neutral bullshit. It's fucking society up, man. It really is. It's goofy, and I hate what it's doing to our entertainment. Go on, Matt. I'm sorry. I just had to get that out.
It's okay. I mean, there's always been bleed over in terms of fan bases. Like, there's always like a small percentage of girls who are into sci-fi and fantasy and action movies and stuff like that. And there's always a small percentage of men who are into like girly stuff, like Disney princesses and My Little Pony and Care Bears and like whatnot. So you're always going to have a small amount of crossover. But the idea to make like an entire shift, like pivot the entire target audience of a beloved franchise that has been established for 30 plus years just doesn't make any sense. And they're doing it out of a political motivation as opposed to like any practical motivation. But speaking of practical motivation, Vader, like we've seen trailers for the upcoming Acolyte series, and they've been met largely with a lot of dislikes on YouTube. And a lot of that is being fueled by what we're seeing as opposed to like what Leslie Headland, is doing, right? So I wanted to get your take. What do you think of what we've seen from the Acolyte so far in terms of the trailers? And do you think that the backlash that they're dealing with here is justified?
I look at these trailers and I just see a lot of just Star Wars-y stuff that they just kind of throw together in a scene and go, here's your Star Wars, except it's got a bunch of chicks in it and aliens that can't blink because we couldn't spend the extra $50 on the CGI to make the guy's eye blink. It's just, it's weird. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing here for me that I want to see. I look at this show and I'm at the point in my life where I just simply don't want to give it any of my time. And I hate that because I loved Star Wars as a kid, as an adult, up until about 5 years ago, and they've just ripped that away from me and from you guys and from all of us that were like true hardcore fans. And it's sad. There's nothing here that I want to watch. I am really pissed off at you that you're going to make us watch this fucking show over the next 6-7 weeks. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't care about these people. I want to cut Star Wars out of my life. I want nothing to do with it anymore. We just lost off. But
it's okay.
it's such a weird place for me to have my head at, because it's this progressive Hollywood DEI bullshit approach to everything nowadays that just makes me want to throw it all in the trash and just start up with something new. I think that's probably why I've taken so much to this new Helldivers game that we play. And I'm not trying to I'm just using that as an example. It's not woke. It's not DEI. It's just a fun new thing that we can all enjoy, that me and my friends enjoy together, and I'm sure it's probably going to happen there too at some point someday. Some people are going to get their grubby little paws on it and fuck it all up. But I'm tired of giving my time and effort to these IPs that don't frankly want my time or my investment put into them. It's not for me anymore. And there's nothing there in these trailers that interests me. I just see a lot of regurgitation from stuff that's already been done. It's like, oh, my wife the other day, she saw this thing on TV. She goes, oh, look, there's Chewbacca. He looks older. I go, that's not Chewbacca. That's not Chewie. That's some bullshit that they made up for this stupid show that they're putting on. She goes, do you not want to watch that? I go, no, I don't want to watch it. It's not for me. I don't know who this show is for, because they have it's for little girls, I guess. So I don't know. There's nothing here that I want to see, and I'm upset about it. And
Nothing here for you.
Nothing. It's not for me. So fuck them. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, well, I find it interesting, especially because Platoon brought this up about Leslie Headland in particular, where essentially you have this woman who helped basically facilitate the abuse and exploitation of other women by being Harvey Weinstein, one of the worst, predators in Hollywood, basically get away with it for like a really long time. Like, she knew what was going on. She knew what he was doing. She didn't say anything. She just, helped it along. And then she comes out and she's like, oh, it's the men who are toxic, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like the ability for people to be toxic. But like Kathleen Kennedy's, like even she said in this quote where she says, my belief is that storytelling does need to be representative of all people. And it's like, why? You don't need to be, exactly like the person, looking like the person on screen in order to identify with them, right? It doesn't matter age, sex, like skin color, all that stuff. If it's a character you care about, you identify with them. It doesn't matter what they look like. So I wanted to throw this to you, Platoon. Why can't Hollywood just understand that, good stories transcend all this identity stuff?
Most of them have no idea what a story even is. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy got to her position by being a very good producer for people who do know what stories are. She did very, very good work helping Steven Spielberg make the great films that he made. She doesn't know what goes into making a story itself. I don't think we should take it away from her, by the way, that she was a very, very good producer. She's got a great record. She famously saved the lives of people on Jurassic Park, saved them from a storm. Very good at grabbing coffee, I'm sure. Like she was very good at what she did. But she's now been put in charge of a very different thing. And we are talking about storytelling. And her motives are much more aligned with sort of HR representatives. So she's a corporate person. She doesn't really understand people and she doesn't really understand storytelling. She just understands what the best makeup of a staff is in her own mind. So that's her primary concern. It's depressing and it's sort of infuriating as well because it doesn't really have its own endpoint. Because I'd really love to get in a room with someone like Kathleen Kennedy and she says something like, oh, it's important that all storytelling resembles all people. And just ask her, well, A, what do you mean by that? And B, why does it matter? Because I don't think it actually does contain its own answer. You get this periodically. It does, unfortunately, tend to be a more female thing than a male-led thing. This sort of want to interfere in the private business of other people does tend to fall more in the female side than the male side. Not just because my mum does it all the time. But like over in the UK at the moment, it's going to seem tangential, but I promise it is related. There's been a few stories that are sort of doing the rounds. There've been, say, private members clubs which have only ever admitted men in their own like 150-year history, and these are falling like flies at the moment because usually it's the case that one woman has decided that it's very important that this club be opened up to women as well. So you lose private male members clubs, you lose private fishing clubs which have only ever admitted men. And one of these women went on the news to discuss her campaign to open up this fishing club to women as well. And she was asked, why do you want to do it? How many women are actually interested? She didn't actually have an answer to that question. She sort of stumbled around and said, well, it's just important. I said, but who's going to benefit from this? Well, it's just important. But why? If no one's benefiting from it, why is it important? No answer to that question at all. And it's the same thing that I think happens here as well. There's a fandom which is perceived as being insular and too male dominated, and some women apparently feel excluded from it, but they don't ever evince the reason for why they want to be included in it. Why do you want to be included in this thing if you apparently don't like it? And why is it that plenty of women have had no trouble feeling included and represented by great female characters that already exist in the story? Like, Leia is a fantastic character. And Mara Jade has never been on film as far as I recall, but she's one of the fan favorite characters because so much great work was done with her in the expanded universe. Like, all of this stuff is admitting of women who are interested in joining it. No men have ever sat around the table saying, no, we must actually by law exclude the women. It's just that left to their own devices, men and women like different things on average. And that's the only problem. I don't see any problem with that. Kathleen Kennedy evidently does. But if you don't want a backlash against it, maybe you should sort of try be more subtle about how you go about breaking open an insular fandom. Maybe if you want more people represented, you should just say, let's make a really, really great female character again on the caliber of Princess Leia. And maybe people will like that. But the problem is they frame it in this incredibly oppositional way where they don't really care about the characters they're making. They are very explicitly saying, no, the problem is just it's too male dominated. And so what are male dominated fandoms supposed to make of that? It's not that you care about telling a better story. It's just that you think that we are a bad thing. So obviously you're going to get criticism if you say that because you're criticizing people to begin with. People don't take kindly to that sort of thing. It's just a mess from top to bottom.
And also, I feel like a lot of the criticism, it's not necessarily geared towards like women specifically. It's geared towards the fact that the Star Wars we've been getting has been shitty. I think, me and Butters have had conversations about how there's only like 2, maybe 2.5 good Star Wars movies. Everything else is pure shit. And it's like, you can only feed a fan base shit for so long before they start, throwing up on you. And it just boggles my mind that they can't see how bad their offerings are. I mean, like the first season of The Mandalorian, okay, maybe a couple episodes there were pretty good. The finale of season 2 was good, but everything leading up to that was kind of crappy. And on the TV front, like other than Andor, which I think is a mixed bag because a lot of people didn't like Andor, I think everything that we've gotten from Star Wars TV has been really, really poor. And so like when we see a trailer for a new Star Wars series that takes place, number one, during a time period in the Star Wars universe that nobody actually cares about, which is, the High Republic. It's yet another frickin' prequel. And it's got like potentially canon breaking stuff in it where basically it's like, the Sith were thought to be extinct for thousands of years. And this takes place like 200 years before the events of the prequels. And you have entire Jedi, entire group of Jedi facing down with like one Sith dude. It's just like, whoa, like what the hell is going on here? So I want to throw this to Brian real quick as well, because and for those of you wondering, Huff is dealing with a storm that's blowing out his internet. So hopefully he'll be able to connect again really soon. But Brian, going back to your points, like enough with the prequels, enough with, this time period in which nobody cares about, enough with the canon breaking stuff. You just dealt with Discovery season 5, which is one of the most problematic prequels probably ever created in the entire history of the franchise.
Yeah.
Like how are they not supposed to get criticism when they do shit like this?
No, and it's so weird because in with Discovery, they made a prequel, realized they made a mistake, and then used time travel to send that prequel as far forward as they could. But then somehow both messed up the past and the future, because now you're like, you've ruined what I already loved, and now you're telling me what I love, where we're going, is shitty. So you've ruined the past and the future, and all I have is that little sliver in the middle that I still like. You somehow managed to ruin the past and the future of the Federation with one show. It's at what point it's either is it inept or is it just pure malicious intent? Because they've done it. And in this last season, they tried to tie one of the characters to like the Enterprise, which everything about it makes no sense. But let's talk about Star Wars. Star Wars is especially corrupt with this because everything they do right now is always, it takes place in this time period. It's some kind of prequel. It's taking place in a specific time period. Well, you didn't already know that part of the story. Don't you want to know where Chewbacca found it? I'm gonna tell you right now. I don't want to know. I don't want to know about this little piece of time between this movie and that movie that this thing could have happened with this character. I'm tired of it because you're not making anything going forward. If you were making movies or telling stories that were still going forward, then maybe I would be interested in visiting time periods that didn't actually affect the story anymore. But because you're not, because all you're doing is creating these little cowardly pockets of story, I'm tired of it.
Then when they do give us things that we might want to see, like for example in the Solo movie,
right?
We always heard about the Kessel Run, right? Right.
Yeah,
Han Solo, and so they show us the Kessel Run, but it's literally the dumbest thing we've ever seen in our lives. It's like it's Han Solo running away from a giant epic space squid. It's the dumbest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah,
while using the computer.
Oh, look at how Han Solo got his name.
It's
no one.
I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to see that. What I had
worse. You made it.
What I had in my head. What I had in my head was way cooler than what this crap was that they put on screen. So quit telling us stories we don't want. It's ridiculous.
His name is Han Solo because he was solo. Shut the fuck up, dude.
I didn't want to know that the reason Lando Calrissian actually really likes the Millennium Falcon is because that he used to fuck the robot whose brain is now in the Millennium Falcon. I didn't need to know that.
They ruined the Falcon. They ruined
the Falcon. Lando Calrissian. They made Han Solo idiot. They somehow, like, when you go back, like, people think, and this is the crazy part, they go, well, they're doing a prequel because they're too afraid to tell a new story. Okay, but in the process, these same people who are unable to tell a new story because they don't feel like they're talented enough or they're too much of a coward, these are the people, the unskilled individuals, going back and deciding the fate of our favorite characters. It's crazy. It's always going to be better what's in your head. Just leave the headcanon to the headcanon and create new stories, dude.
Right.
Well, the problem is a lot of the headcanon is is taking these fan fictions and turning them into official canon. Like, I don't think Leslie Headland is being truthful when she says she's a Star Wars fan. I think that she got a job at Lucasfilm to create a new Star Wars TV show, and she basically just learned surface level stuff about, like, okay, there's Jedi, there's Sith, let's make a story with that stuff in it because people like lightsabers, and I think that's the extent of her knowledge when it comes to Star Wars. And I think that Kathleen Kennedy, for as much as she says it's all about the story, it's all about the characters, it's all about storytelling, it's like she doesn't actually practice what she preaches, right? Because like she keeps greenlighting this stuff that nobody freaking wants.
No one. Not a single person wants this.
I still want to know if there's a rock in this show. If there's a geode character, because it will literally be the dumbest thing ever put on television if they actually pull this off. I really want to see it. I want to see a rock piloting
like that character from Ragnarok. The one that I want to see that too now.
It's going to be crazy.
No, at this point, let's just go like full on retard. Let's go full on childish, Saturday morning cartoon, and let's go completely cut out any form of realism, and let's just go full stupid
AI
nonsense camp that doesn't actually connect to anything. Like it stop. Let's just do it. Let's just go nuts, because at the very least we can all be like, all right, well, we don't gotta take this serious now. Like the lore doesn't matter, story doesn't matter, these characters don't matter. We can just
And you will also bring up an entire generation of male fans who believe that women have ruined what they love, which I don't think is healthy. It's not necessarily true either.
No.
But that will be the impression it's given because that is the way in which it's been framed explicitly. There's actually an incredibly low barrier to entry. I was never really a huge fan of like the cartoons and Dave Filoni's stuff, but no one, from what I know anyway, had a problem with, say, Bo-Katan or Ahsoka Tano or anything when they debuted in the cartoons. And in fact, they were quite popular characters. Males did not have a problem with these characters being there, quite liked them. You put them in live action, you have one of them take over from the title role of the guy whose name is above the shop in The Mandalorian, and it becomes the Bo-Katan show, and it's crap. And then the Ahsoka show comes out and just mucks around with the lore, and the character is dire and dour and boring and staid and stoic. And it's so awful. And then, lo and behold, you get criticism of characters that the same people used to really like, which kind of suggests to you that it's not sexism motivating the criticism, because it can't be. Otherwise, we'd have criticized them from the beginning. No, it's what you've chosen to do with those characters that is the problem.
Yeah, and George Lucas himself came out against the criticism that Star Wars is all about white people. And he said it's the most diverse movie of its time because you had main characters who were aliens, you had main characters who were robots, you had, it wasn't just a black guy in Lando Calrissian who was a scoundrel. You also had one of the top Jedis of the time, Samuel L. Jackson's character, Mace Windu, was a person of color, and like, two of the major characters in both the originals and the prequels were women. And so he's like, so I don't buy any of this criticism, but it was all criticism that Kathleen Kennedy kind of created and propagated during her time after he named her his successor. And it just kind of boggles my mind. But I want to get to some super chats real quick. Mama Cini for €5 says AI can lay out structure, grammar, syntax, vocabulary, and the such, but it won't be pulling pathos out of its ass when it has no emotions. That's true. That's why there's always going to have to be a human creator behind AI generated stuff. Otherwise, it's just going to be soulless and boring. But this next super chat is actually about the next topic we're going to be talking about, which is from Foxhound for £1.99, $1.99. Didn't you all know Anakin blew up the Death Star? And guys,
oh god.
So we have to talk about this because this is just too good, which is basically one of the main actors in the Acolyte doesn't know anything about Star Wars, and this was hilarious. So I'm actually going to play you the two videos here. So first of all, this actor right here who plays the Black Jedi in the show, I guess.
It's probably gay, dude.
Probably gay. He's definitely got he's got the black haircut in the show to make sure you know that he's black. Yeah. So this is him on the press tour, and he basically says that Anakin Skywalker blew up the Death Star. So this is very short. It's 4 seconds. Big shout out to Jonas J. Campbell for posting this. So here it is.
Well, Anakin just killed a whole Death Star. How many people died on that?
So just to give you guys context here, right? So the whole thing about the Acolyte is that they're trying to blur the line. They're Game of Thronesing it, basically. There's no light side. There's no dark side. It's just about power, right? And who has the ability to wield it. And so he's trying to justify this stupid idea being injected into a very simple morality tale that there is no good and evil. There's only shades of gray. And so he's trying to say, well, how many people died when the Death Star blew up, right? Like all those hundreds of thousands or millions of people who were manning that space station, the hero of the story basically killed them. But he's saying that Anakin Skywalker was the one who blew up the Death Star, not Luke. And so it's very obvious he doesn't know what he's saying. Now you can kind of see his co-stars sitting here next to him kind of cringing when he says this. But here's the funny thing is he doubles down on it in a completely separate interview on a different day. And props to Nerdrotic for doing this. But this one's about 30 seconds long. And I want you guys to listen to what his co-star has to say at the end here. So check this out.
I did get in trouble for this answer at Star Wars Con. I got heat. Yeah. And in my mind, it's so funny to me because it literally, as a person who was outside and just a fan coming in, that was what was so beautiful and interesting to me. People have been talking to me online about how Darth Vader is such a bad person. It's very clear, and it's very well established from those actions. But if you can't look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this right now.
You should just shut up.
It's just,
Did you see at the end there, his co-star was like, you should just shut up.
Just shut up.
Just shut up. And I think that he couldn't have gotten any better advice than that because he obviously doesn't know anything about what he's talking about. But this just further reinforces that the people in charge of Star Wars and in charge of making Star Wars don't actually care about Star Wars. I think that's the most infuriating thing about, a situation like this, where you have an actor in the show and, actors, okay, maybe they don't care about doing research or studying the franchise they're going to be in or like whatever, but at least don't double down on it in public, right? Matt Vader, or I should say, Mr. Butters, Dutch Butters. What do you think of this exchange here, where basically this actor just made a complete fool of himself, not once but twice?
I just think it's typical of what's going on right now with these shows. These actors, they don't know these IPs, they don't know these stories. They're just there for a paycheck, and they go on these interview tours or whatever they're called, and they just try to say the right things, but you can't say the right things when you don't know what things to say, right? I mean, his research was he probably watched a couple of the old movies and read the script that he had to do for his own show. And
he watched the prequels, right? He didn't even watch the original movie.
Yeah, because Little Annie did blow up the one Trade Federation ship, so I guess maybe he thought that was the Death Star.
Yeah, he probably thought that was the Death Star.
Yeah, making me think about that terrible movie. Okay,
that was a terrible movie. But the prequels are terrible. I know there's people out there that love the prequels, but God, let's be real.
They're bad.
They're bad.
They're bad.
They're pretty bad. But so one of the things I want to take issue with his particular argument in Platoon, I want to throw this to you because you can probably verbalize it much better than anyone else on the panel here, which is this idea that killing the people on the Death Star was an act of mass genocide, and basically that doesn't make him a hero. It just makes him as bad as the bad guys who blew up a planet. But when you look at the original Star Wars, right, A New Hope, it's a very simple morality tale. It's good versus evil. And when you have a space station, yeah, it's filled with millions of people, but they're going around blowing up planets that have billions of people on them. Is it really evil to destroy that thing and all the people who are on it? Like, is it evil for Allied soldiers to be killing German soldiers in World War II simply because, they're, gassing Jewish people and they're trying to take over the world and they're trying to destroy, civilization? Like, at what point do we draw the line where it's like, this isn't shades of gray? This is very clearly good versus evil.
Yeah, actually, that's the example I was going to bring up as well. Is it morally bad that we liberate concentration camps because we have to kill people to do it? I mean, it's obviously insane, but it's such a mid-wit answer as well, which is and it's something that modern Star Wars has got the problem with. You had The Last Jedi, which did something very similar, when Rian Johnson's big idea was, isn't it interesting how morally grey it is that an arms dealer sells weapons to the rebellion and the Empire? Shades of grey. Isn't that an interesting story? No, that's not an interesting story. That's just you trying to be clever and failing badly. There's plenty of room for morally grey, politically complex storytelling within Star Wars. The prequels, I agree, not good films, but some of the ideas that are present there, they're creditable. And I think they tried to do it. They tried to give you the sense that the Jedi are not this embodiment of goodness and light and life. That's what they think of themselves as. And Andor, which does it incredibly well. Luthen's great speech about what you have to sacrifice and the things you have to be prepared to do in order to get a rebellion off the ground. That's all shades of grey stuff, but it's compellingly done because it operates within the moral framework of the Star Wars universe. You have two separate things being talked about. You have the overarching morality of the thing, which is really embodied in the Force, the light side, the dark side, the idea that there is such a thing as good and evil. And then within that moral framework, you have immense amounts of storytelling space to tell politically grey stories. The politics is where your moral nuance comes in and where people can do dark things. But you're allowed to say they're dark because you still have these two poles of good and evil against which you can measure them. If we're now getting to the point where it's, was it morally grey as opposed to good to blow up the Death Star that's just killed billions of people on Alderaan and it is coming to blow up another planet and end the rebellion and keep the entire galaxy under the tyrannical yoke of the Empire? Is that morally grey? No, obviously it's not. But this is what very stupid people think morally grey stuff is. And I want to get away from it. But the Jedi are now being sort of roped into this. I think this is probably a legacy of the prequels, is that like a lot of creators like Leslie Headland will look at it and say, well, we've established the Jedi are not themselves the embodiment of goodness. So how about we further diminish them? How about we start talking about their misuses and abuses of power? And I think we've probably exhausted that line of inquiry. I'd like to see a little bit more goodness and badness in Star Wars again, rather than more of this sort of quizzling nonsense.
You know, Brian, one of the things I learned when I worked at Paramount Studios during the time of Enterprise that was being shot is that, you know, the people who ran Star Trek didn't want to hire fans of Star Trek.
Right.
And the reason for that was because the fans of Star Trek would constantly fight them on their original ideas that they wanted to do with the show.
Right.
And this is kind of like standard practice now in Hollywood, where basically if you're a fan of a particular franchise, the people running that franchise will never hire you. And so it doesn't surprise me that, you know, a lot of the actors are probably like, you know, they probably don't care. In fact, the most recent example we have of this is Henry Cavill with The Witcher, where he was a fan of the IP, he was a fan of the books, he was a fan of the games. And he had major problems with what the producers were choosing to do, to the point where he decided to leave. And the producers were like, "Good riddance. You were nothing but a pain in our asses." So when it comes to Star Wars, though, like it seems like they're specifically hiring people who aren't fans, but the people at the top, they're not technically fans either, but they worship at the altar of George Lucas. And so they're like, as long as we're sticking to George's vision, we're doing the right thing. And that's where you get Dave Filoni and his rewriting of Star Wars canon, and Kathleen Kennedy and all these people who are like, well, as long as George has no problem with it, we must be going down the right path. And I get really sick of this hero worship of George Lucas, because let's face it, George Lucas was not the creative genius behind the success of the original trilogy. Yeah, he pushed for the technical innovations and special effects, and he's a smart businessman, but creatively, he's very, very untalented. And so like you get a situation with the prequels where by that point, nobody was there around to tell him that his ideas sucked and that they needed to, you know, work out new ones. And we got pure George Lucas with the prequels. I know that there are a lot of people out there who love the prequels, but I will maintain to my dying day that they are bad movies, poorly written movies. And so like you have a situation here where the people at the top of Star Wars are worshiping this guy who's not a good creative guy, right? Like he has great ideas, but much like Zack Snyder, his execution of those ideas are very lacking. So like, why do you think that people who are actual fans of Star Wars, people who are good creatives who are fans, can never get their foot in the door with some of these beloved franchises?
Well, I think you already nailed it on the head. Like, no one wants to be told no. Oh, we can't do that. They want yes men in the writers room. They don't want people that are actually saying, well, you know, studio, we can't exactly do, Han Solo doing this because, you know, that doesn't make sense canonically. They want people that are going to tell them, yes, I will make that story. I will make that work or whatever. And they don't really care about fans. They just care about people that are going to push their agenda and keep their franchise running. That's what they care about. That's all they care about. And I think you're right. Like, George Lucas is not the crazy talent a lot of people think he is. I think that he had a lot of people around him that were very good, and that team was very good when they made the first Star Wars. Like his wife was like, or ex-wife or whatever, right? She was an editor or something. And she edited together a good story. But I don't think that the people involved now, I mean, yeah, you have Dave Filoni and I'm forgetting that guy's name all of a sudden. What's his name? Damn it, from Marvel. Anyways,
Kevin Feige.
Yeah, no, not Kevin Feige. The guy that was in the movies and Swingers, and I'm forgetting his name.
John Favreau.
Thank you, Favreau. Favreau and Filoni, like, yeah, they worship at the altar of George Lucas, but they're relegated to like prequels. Like, hey, why don't you give Dave Filoni and Favreau an actual movie that's taking place in the future? And I might give it a shot because they have produced Star Wars stories that sort of work for me. And some of these episodes of like The Mandalorian were actually really, really good. But I don't think they're ever going to do that. I don't think they're going to give real, like, people that actually are attempting to create Star Wars stories that fit the original narrative. They don't want to give those people too much power, and giving them a movie that takes place in the future. That's not what they're going to do. They want yes men.
Well, guys, first of all, I want to bring on someone who it's a very special day today. It's his birthday. So I want to wish him a very happy birthday. I also cannot wait to hear him talk about George Lucas, the one and only Tom Connors Jr. Tom Connors, first of all, happy birthday, my friend.
Hi, and thank you. Well, I figured since you pretty much say everything I always say about George, I might as well just come on and back you up. But there's not much left to say. I mean, you use the hero worship. People suck. Pointed out that everybody else was better than him.
Yeah. I don't think we missed anything. I think we got them all. Yeah. How was your hookers and blow today, my friend?
Not did your hooker bring cake?
No, I overslept my alarm somehow. I got to do a better alarm for Saturday. This is like the second time in a row. This is the reason I wasn't here last week. I wake up and I'm like, it's fucking 3 o'clock last week. Tonight,
dude, your camera looks so much better today. It's crazy. You got a new camera?
Same camera.
He just has it on.
He has it on. Oh, that's right.
No, he's 1 year older and more distinguished.
That's right. Distinguished.
Yeah, he's better looking on camera, is what Brian's saying.
That's true. Yeah.
But so I want to wrap up this talk about Star Wars and get your guys' take. So first of all, Acolyte's premiering on Wednesday of next week. I am going to be asking everyone on the panel involved in watching it so that we can talk about it on Saturdays. But I want to get your general consensus is like,
nope.
How bad do you think this show is going to be? Just everyone. Feel free.
Epic levels of garbage, dude. Like, just look at the cast involved. It's like a DEI dream.
I bet the music will be okay.
It's like
the music might be good.
Like, I went through a cash sheet and said, "Oh, that one, and that one," and someone's "Oh, what about white guys? White what? No, that's not in this."
I have a strange theory. I was reading the interview with Leslie Headland the other day, and I'm starting to think she might actually really like all the Star Wars. Because she has a tattoo that she's had before she got the job, and she was talking about how she turned in a story to Kathy, and Kathy's like, "This is an amazing Star Wars story. Now make it an amazing you story," and that's when all this other shit got inserted into this story. So I'm wondering if this is not going to be another X-Men situation, like with X-Men 97. And I'm not trying to say that Leslie Headland's talented at all or good or anything like that, but I'm starting to wonder if maybe she wasn't. And we'll see what comes of this. But yeah, I have no hope for this. The only thing I'm going to be upset is if we don't get Geode in live action.
I know, right? We need Geode.
That's the only Star Wars toy I will buy since Baby Yoda. If we get a Geode toy, I will buy that bastard.
All right, guys, real quick, we got a super chat from Mr. Tickle Trunk for $5 Canadian. One black effeminate man, one brunette female protagonist who's LGBTQ, and one tall white female villain. How many more of these are going to be made?
I brought that up yesterday. I was like, what is this? Your starter pack for a new woke show? You got a gay Don Lemon type, a British dark-haired type, and a tall blonde or white-haired type that is your bad guy usually. Yeah.
And Fluffy Panda, member for 13 months. Thank you so much, Fluffy Panda. Really appreciate that. Acolyte will make Ahsoka look like brilliant. Yeah, probably.
It would have to be really, really bad to do that, but it's believable. I can see it happening. Did I read on Twitter already? Is it Alan from Film Threat said that episode 4 of the Acolyte has pronouns? Like episodes 1 and 2 are.
I hope so.
I think you
Episode
said
3
episode
is
3
really
is where
bad,
the
and
Force
episode
is
4
female,
is worse. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure it's pretty bad.
I really hope so.
Well, ironically, they're releasing the first 2 back like on the same day, so you're getting 2 episodes to binge essentially, and then they're going
doubles my workload.
Yes.
So,
indeed.
but they're only like 30 minutes long, right? Right.
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
There's only 6 of them. And guys, we finally hit our goal today. Major Chai Chai comes in with 5 Salty Nerd gifted podcast memberships.
Major Chai Chai.
Major Chai Chai. Thank you so much, sir. We have now hit our 10 membership goal for the live stream. Appreciate you guys, WG and Major Chai Chai. You guys are heroes in our book. So let's talk a little bit about Sony hero worshiping the box office to round out today's episode. And I'm glad that Tom showed up because I would love to get his take on this. So, guys, we have this article in Variety about the head of Sony Pictures says that box office recovery is imminent and that everything is going to be just fine. So all the doom and gloom around the box office being dead and theaters dying, this guy is not buying into it. And it's kind of interesting in this article, by the way. If you guys want to read this article, feel free to go into the description because I link all the articles that we talk about on the show in there. And he says that there were like 3 major disruptions that have caused today's current box office crisis. And once those disruptions are kind of overcome and things move on, box office is going to be back to normal in his opinion. Maybe a little bit lower in terms of like profitability, but at the same time, he thinks that it's going to make a full recovery. And he says that over the past 5 years, the 3 major things that have caused the current crisis are competition with streaming, the disruptions and cost increases brought on by the COVID era, and last year's writers and actors strikes. Together, these have led to fewer films reaching theaters. And what is really happening is that people got out of the habit of going to theaters. As the marketplace begins to recover in terms of having big films, you'll see people go to theaters again, assuming that, you know, the big films are enough of a draw. The second half of the year, you're going to see quite a resurgence. One film will improve the odds of the next film. Starting in July, you'll see every week a big film coming out. And so he's basically saying that, you know, don't worry, theaters aren't going anywhere. And as soon as the big films start getting released, you're going to see a lot of people starting to go back into theaters. Now, he's not taking into account all the Bidenomics factors of theaters costing so much and people making less money and their dollar being worth less. But Tom Connors, Mr. Birthday Boy himself, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, what you said at the end there is technically true, that things are on the downswing economically, and there's a million reasons why people have almost vacated theaters altogether. But just like with this last week's arguments over Furiosa, there's a lot of people claiming, oh, well, people are killing theaters. They're not going to see these great movies. It's like, no. Hollywood has sucked lately. They do not earn our trust. They have not earned our trust back. They don't deserve our money. As Chris Gore points out, they make shit we don't need. And then the sooner they realize that, the better. Sony actually is one of the companies that's in better shape right now. Why? Because they decided to stay out of this whole streaming wars bullshit. So basically, they've got money. They've got movies coming up. Bad Boys is probably the only thing about Bad Boys is it has no competition, so it's lucky there. But who gives a shit about Will Smith anymore? Mm-hmm. Like even that last trailer, they really dove heavily into Martin Lawrence. I think we talked about it here. But at the end of the day, I don't think theaters are fixed overall, but Sony's in better shape than the rest of the studios. So if they're speaking from their point of view, maybe. But any other point of view, I don't know. Because this last weekend, they were the ones that kicked the ass at the box office. Don't forget that. Because they put out a $60 million movie, a modestly budgeted film, which is something Sony's been well known for lately. And it's going to do nothing but make bank for them. Because it's already in the black. It was prepaid for by Netflix. So whatever they make in video sales and stuff is going to be all gravy. Mm-hmm. And Garfield made them a ton of lasagna. So things like that, Sony's been doing that for a while. Tom Rothman was the worst thing that ever happened to Fox, but I'll be damned if he wasn't the best thing that ever happened to Sony. Now, yes, they've had hiccups and mistakes like Madam Web, but it's movies like Garfield that are going to get them out of that. And Rothman wants to take chances with lesser known and unknown things. He's not a big IP guy. So
Yeah. What's interesting, Platoon, so there's a part in this article where it mentions how Sony's been rumored to be circling Paramount in terms of like buying up Paramount and absorbing them and stuff like that. And this guy, the head of Sony, basically flat out came out and said, yeah, we're not doing that. He says it doesn't fit into our business model. We're looking for strategic investments that complement our strategy. We are not going to go outside of that strategy that has been enormously successful for us for the past several years. And so this idea that Sony could, buy up another studio is just kind of going out the window because they're happy not having their own streaming liability. They're happy licensing out their content. They're happy writing off the coattails of Marvel's popularity and releasing movies that nobody really cares about. and then re-releasing them because they believe the memes. But Tom's absolutely right. Like they've been probably the most successful studio in terms of like profitability to come out of the COVID era, because they didn't jump on the gravy train of like, you know, the streaming wars. So what's your take on this thing that Sony believes that theaters are going to be coming back into profitability really soon, and that they're going to be sticking with their strategy of basically just licensing stuff out and streaming instead of trying to compete with it?
Well, I guess in order, the cinema theater point is an interesting one. It might be the case that, you know, Sony does quite well out of this, but Sony is not the only studio which theaters rely on to populate itself with movies. And as long as there isn't a huge amount to be going for, I don't really see much of a revival there. And again, so much of the box office of the last 10 years has been eaten up by so few brands, principally the Marvel stuff, Avatar, temporarily Star Wars, and Jurassic World, I think, accounted for the majority of box office takes at one point for a period of about 5 years. You might get like an uptick based on current numbers, but I still think theaters will be struggling just because the big draws are not pulling in the numbers anymore, and they haven't been for a little while, and there's no sign that that will reverse. So I don't know. I'm cautious about, you know, diagnosing the imminent death of theaters, but I still think they will be hoping that the studios will do their job a bit better before the studios start telling us that everything will be fine in a few months' time. It'll all be great by Christmas. I've heard that before, and it didn't work. But on Sony, like, and streaming, it sounds like not dissimilarly to the way that Apple has gone about its own streaming network. All the people who were talking for a while about, well, will Apple buy out Lucasfilm specifically, or even Disney if Disney goes that way? It won't happen because it's a relatively sensible company, and they've seen what Disney has done in spending huge amounts of money buying up every studio they can, bankrolling their like bespoke streaming service with immense amounts of debt, and not getting anything back because they've driven the properties they wanted to rely on for money into the ground. Don't do that, folks. It's a bad business strategy, hasn't worked, and Sony would be well advised to stay clear of it.
Well, Brian, do you think that theaters are basically going extinct, or do you think there's a way for them to come back?
Yeah, there's a way for them to come back. I think they need to start putting more emphasis on theaters and less on their streaming. Sure, have your streaming platforms, but like a movie coming out in 3 weeks on streaming or 4 weeks on streaming, like, right, you're guaranteeing that half your audience has the, you know, they don't feel compelled to go to the movies if they can wait a month to see that exact same movie in the comfort of their home for a lot less money. And I'm not saying you gouge customers, but like, for $20, literally, like within a few weeks after a movie comes out, for $20, you can buy that movie on VOD. It's not even on a streaming service. You can still buy it on VOD. And everyone in your family can watch that movie for $20 versus the, you know, $60, $70, whatever it costs at the theater. So you're ruining the theater experience because there's no anticipation. Like, I wanted to see Fall Guy. Mm-hmm. I didn't have time at the time to go see it. And then I turned on my TV and I'm like, oh man, Fall Guy is on Amazon Prime already. I'm like, well, I don't really need to go anymore. And listen, if it was still at the theater, I would have gone to see it at the theater, 100%. So you're giving people, you're training people to not take the theater seriously. You're going to make less money. You know, it's almost like this sort of chop shop, burn and churn version of movie making. Because everyone wants as much content as possible for their streaming services, that the quality is starting to suffer. And even with quality movies, they're being treated the same way as the burn and churn, you know, asylum type films. You know, and what do you expect audiences to do now? Audiences don't have to go to theaters, so you know they don't have to take a risk on a movie, which means that theaters are going to take less risks. And we're going to be in this situation where it went from like, well, we have to spend $300 million because every movie to be $1 billion franchise, to now they're going to just churn out as many crap movies as they can to get their streaming services up because they're not taking the theater seriously. I think I think these studios will survive if they take the theater experience seriously. There was a time where Disney would release a movie, and then after it made its 3-month run in the theater, it would go into the vault. and like you weren't gonna see it again until we decide you can. Like there was that moment where it's like, if you didn't see it in the theater, you might not see this movie ever. And now I'm like, I can just see anything I want 3 weeks later. And there's got to be, you have to take the art seriously, because like they're not taking it seriously. They're treating it like fast fashion or something.
They need to completely restructure the way they do movie releases now. 100%.
100%.
You know, movies, it costs too much to go to the movie theater right now. I'm sorry. It just does. It's, you know, it's $15-16 for a ticket. DFX is more, you know, if you want like the good seats and the good sound. It's $15 for a bucket of popcorn. It's $8 for a Coke. You know, it's ridiculous. You know, I haven't gotten that much of a raise. You know, your yearly 3% raise doesn't even come close to making up for the $200 grocery trips every other weekend that you get half the groceries that you used to get. You know, Bidenomics is screwing everything up. But yeah, you know, I'm looking at the rest of the summer release movies. There's some good movies coming out. It's a stacked summer release schedule. You got everything from Axel F coming out, the new Beverly Hills Cop movie, you know, Deadpool, you know, there's
Beverly Hills Cop is coming to streaming, not theaters, which is a
really? Is it?
thing.
Okay, yeah, that's insane. I guess that is a Netflix movie.
Why would you do that?
Why would again? Why would
Netflix paid for it?
It's just silly.
That's fair.
Twisters, that looks fun.
Yeah,
you know, Deadpool and Wolverine, that's gonna be
and the
fun.
things that you're
These
upset about, Dutch Butters. I don't know if I can call you that.
Well, that's what you're calling me, Tom. Don't fucking dead name me.
I think
okay?
I'm going to call you. I'm going to call you Matt too.
Okay,
just
don't
show you how dumb that idea is.
But
you know, you're right. But the problem is that all
Jeremy?
those things that you griped about are the studio's fault.
yeah, I know.
Unfortunately, it's not the theater's fault. They have been pushed and pushed and pushed into these corners so long that theaters have become one of the least profitable businesses in the world, just because the studios have squeezed them. And this putting movies on streaming so quickly, I'm just waiting for the theater owners to burst, because they are going to get pissed about this. This is why people aren't going. Part of the reason is because, like you guys were just saying before, and I think you were saying this, Brian, is that these movies are already coming out on video on demand within a month of when they're released.
Right.
So why should I go see Furiosa? I know it's going to be on video on demand in a week.
Yeah, 17
like,
days.
I'm not rushing out there. I'm not rushing to see the movie when I'm like not really excited about it as it is. Now, if it was going to be there in movies in theaters for 3 months and I wanted to be part of the conversation, you know what? I might have to get out there and watch it. But
all right,
I
guys.
can be part of the conversation in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I have to get rolling here myself.
Yeah. So hate to bring this wonderful conversation to an end, but we had a lot to talk about today, and we talked about it. I want to thank my fantastic panel of nerds for being here and sharing their great insights with our audience. Tom Connors, happy birthday, my friend. I know you got a birthday stream happening after this.
What I do want to say though, real quick, is people check out our Richard Dreyfuss video that we dropped today. This might be one of the most important videos we've ever put out, because the media is going after this man hardcore and nobody knows the truth. We're putting the truth out there. Check out that video, please. Share it wide. I'm not just biased just because I did all the research. No, it's a very important video, because the media is lying to you. The people that were trying to cancel him are lying to you. We have 2 independent reports in that video that are completely different than what the media is saying. I got to run. Thank you so much, guys. I'm so sorry I was late today. I love all of you, even Brian.
All right.
Well,
no, I always got to give Brian some crap. Thank you so much, guys.
Tom, say my name. Say it.
Matt, too.
Say my name.
Dutch Butters.
All right, we got a link to Tom's birthday stream in the chat.
You know what Dutch Butters sounds like? Very gay.
So. You're gay. Your bald head's gay.
I want to butter up your Dutch.
Maybe I should.
Why are you gay?
Maybe I should put some Dutch butter on my head, and I would be so gay. All right, love you.
Have a good one, Tom. Mr. The Little Platoon, do you have any final thoughts, and where can people find more of you?
Yeah, Little Platoon is the main channel. Lost Chord is the second channel. I always forget my Twitter handle. I think it's @PlatoonPod. There will be stuff coming out. There's definitely going to be some Acolyte stuff. There might be some Doctor Who stuff. Yeah, we shall see. But thank you again for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And a link to Platoon's channel is in the description. Brian from the Popcast, any final thoughts? And where can people find more of you?
final thoughts. Star Wars sucks. I don't want to watch the Acolyte. Can we do anything effing else? Please, I beg you,
Rings of
sir.
power.
And you can find me at the Popcast and Pop Culture Unleashed. I have 2 channels, so go check it out.
And Mr. Butters, what are we doing on the Salty Nerd?
Quit asking me that question because I really don't know. I don't have any idea what we're doing this Tuesday.
You ask him that every week.
Every week.
He answers the same way every week. And I don't know.
Yeah, and tomorrow there's going to be an email coming out from him to our group. He's going to go, "Hey guys, what are we watching this week?" And then we're going to figure it out. And then
Fucking Acolyte. That's what we're
so,
watching.
Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna we'll be talking about stuff, pop culture, movies,
stuff,
TV, video games.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give a big shout out to everyone who donated super chats throughout the stream. We got Mr. Scotty Dub, who's still undefeated at the top of the top donators tier list. Thank you so much, Scotty. Really appreciate you. Then we got Foxhound, Mamacini, and Mr. Tickle Trunk. Thank you so much for your donations. Really appreciate you guys. And also want to give a huge shout out to WG and Major Chai Chai for the 10 gifted memberships. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for that. And be sure to tune in next Saturday, same salty time, same salty channel for more Salty Saturdays. And until then, stay salty, my friends.
Hey, folks, thanks so much for watching this live stream. If you want to watch our previous live stream, make sure to click right here. Or if you would like to check out one of our favorite highlights, click right here.